The scent of ceremonial incense hung in the air like a suffocating cloud, sweet, yet threatening, much like the smiles of the women surrounding me. Smoke curled upward in delicate tendrils, disappearing into the rafters of the great hall, where centuries of similar rituals had played out. My hands trembled as I smoothed down the front of my gown, a hand-me-down from my cousin, hastily altered to hide the worst of my scars. The pale blue fabric shimmered in the candlelight, almost beautiful enough to distract from the marked flesh it concealed. Tonight was the mating ceremony, when eligible females of the pack would be presented to visiting alphas from neighboring territories, a tradition as old as our kind, designed to forge alliances and strengthen bloodlines. For most, it was the pinnacle of their existence, a chance at power, status, and belonging. For me, it was nothing but another opportunity for humiliation. "Stand up straight, Ilara," my aunt hissed, pinching my arm as she adjusted my hair for the 5th time. My pale blonde strands had been painstakingly arranged to cascade over my right shoulder, another strategic concealment. And for goddess' sake, try to look pleasant. No alpha wants a mate who looks like she's attending her own funeral. I forced my lips into what I hoped resembled a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. My reflection in the polished silver mirror confirmed my fears. I looked terrified. A deer sensing the hunter's approach. "I don't understand why you insisted she participate," I heard my uncle mutter to my aunt. "It's not as if anyone will choose her. We're just wasting everyone's time and risking offense to the visiting packs." My aunt's reply was too low for even my enhanced hearing to catch, but her sharp glance in my direction spoke volumes. "I wasn't here by choice. I was here because my participation was mandated by pack law. Every female of age must be presented, regardless of desirability, even the damaged ones, even me." I clutched the small pendant hanging at my throat, my mother's last gift before she died. A simple silver crescent moon, cool against my feverish skin. "Strength comes not from perfection, but from surviving what would break others," she had whispered as she pressed it into my palm. I was 7 then, newly scarred, and learning what it meant to be suddenly repulsive in a society that valued physical perfection above all else. The ceremonial drums began their rhythmic pounding, vibrating through the stone floor and into my bones. The other girls immediately straightened, eyes bright with anticipation. They were beautiful, every one of them. Unblemished skin, graceful limbs, and the confident glow that came from knowing your worth in a world that had always valued you. I shrank further into myself, wishing I could melt into the shadows. "Places, everyone!" The ceremony mistress clapped her hands, her severe face betraying nothing but cool efficiency. "Remember, you represent not only yourselves, but your families and our entire pack. Dignity and grace at all times." We lined up according to family rank, which placed me near the end, a blessing in disguise. Perhaps by the time my name was called, the visiting alphas would be too distracted by the previous beauties to notice my flaws. The massive oak doors swung open, and the procession began. One by one, girls stepped forward into the great hall, announced by their lineage and accomplishments. Polite applause followed each introduction, occasionally punctuated by murmurs of appreciation for a particularly striking candidate. The line dwindled until only 3 of us remained. My heart hammered against my ribs with such force, I feared it might actually break through. The girl before me, Sabine, with her perfect dark curls and flawless olive skin, gave me a look of such naked pity that I had to turn away. Ilara of the Moonstone bloodline, daughter of the late healer Karina, my name. My cue. My legs moved of their own accord, carrying me forward into the bright, judgmental light of the great hall. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me, evaluating, assessing, dismissing. I kept my gaze fixed on a point just above the heads of the assembled dignitaries, refusing to witness their reactions. The silence was deafening. Where other girls had received at least polite acknowledgement, my introduction was met with nothing but the awkward shuffling of feet and a few poorly disguised whispers. I felt each second stretch into eternity as I stood there, exposed and unwanted. "Continue," a bored voice finally said, and I was dismissed to join the line of already presented females. Relief flooded through me. The worst was over. Now I could fade into the background for the remainder of the evening, fulfill my obligation, and return to my solitary existence come morning. But as I turned to take my place, something unusual happened. A commotion at the main entrance drew everyone's attention. The ceremonial guards snapped to attention, their previously relaxed postures suddenly rigid with formality. His Majesty, King Damien of the Northern Territories, Alpha of the Shadow Crest Pack, Lord of the Five Valleys. The announcement sent a shockwave through the assembly. The Northern King was not expected. His territory was vast and largely isolated, his pack known for their exceptional strength and fierce independence. They rarely participated in interpack ceremonies, preferring to keep to themselves, yet here he was, arriving unannounced in the middle of our mating ritual. I should have used the distraction to slip quietly into place, but something held me rooted to the spot. Perhaps it was simple curiosity. I had never seen the Northern King, had only heard tales of his legendary ferocity in battle and his ruthless leadership. The crowd parted like a wave before him as he strode into the hall, flanked by two imposing guards. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, unhurried yet purposeful. Power emanated from him in almost visible waves, sending primal shivers of warning down my spine. This was not merely an alpha, but something more, a being who had transcended the ordinary limitations of our kind. I couldn't see his face clearly from my position, only the broad outline of his shoulders beneath a cloak of midnight fur, and the gleam of what appeared to be a silver crown against raven black hair. But then, as if sensing my scrutiny, he paused and turned. His eyes found mine across the crowded hall with unerring precision, as if he had known exactly where I stood. Eyes so pale they appeared almost colorless in the candlelight, set in a face of harsh, angular beauty. The collective breath of the assembly seemed to halt as his gaze locked with mine, unwavering and inscrutable. I should have looked away. Protocol demanded that unmated females show proper deference to an alpha of his stature, but I remained frozen, trapped in that moment of unexpected connection, my heart thundering in my chest. His expression betrayed nothing as he studied me. No disgust, no pity, not even the polite disinterest I had come to expect. Just a calculating intensity that seemed to strip away layers, seeing past flesh to something deeper. Then the moment shattered, as our host, Alpha Bernard, rushed forward with effusive greetings, drawing the Northern King's attention away from me. I exhaled shakily, unaware until that moment that I had been holding my breath. What was that about? Whispered Sabine, as I finally took my place in line beside her. Why did the Northern King look at you like that? I shook my head, unable to form words. My skin felt electrified where his gaze had touched, a sensation both foreign and disturbing. I don't know, I finally managed to whisper back. Maybe he was just surprised to see... Your scars? She finished bluntly when I trailed off. I nodded, swallowing hard. Of course that was it. I was a curiosity, nothing more. Perhaps even a reminder of why the Northern Pack kept to themselves, maintaining the purity of their bloodlines rather than risking alliance with lesser packs like ours. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. The visiting alphas, previously relaxed and evaluative, now seemed tense in the presence of the Northern King. He had taken a seat of honor beside our pack leader, his powerful frame dwarfing those around him, his expression remote as he observed the proceedings with cool detachment. I tried to make myself invisible, shrinking behind the taller girls, grateful that my part in this humiliating spectacle was over. Soon the formal introductions would conclude, followed by the feast and dancing, where matches would be tentatively made. No one would seek me out. I would be free to retreat to the kitchens or gardens, anywhere away from pitying glances and whispered comments. But as the final girl was presented, and the ceremony master began to announce the commencement of celebrations, the Northern King suddenly raised his hand. The hall fell instantly silent. Before we proceed, he said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying effortlessly to every corner of the vast space, I would like to invoke the ancient rite of first selection. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd. First selection was seldom used anymore, an old tradition that gave visiting royalty the privilege of making the first claim on a potential mate before others could approach. It was considered somewhat barbaric by modern standards, a relic from more territorial times. Our pack leader looked momentarily flustered but quickly recovered. "Of course, Your Majesty. The honor is yours. Which of our daughters has caught your royal eye?" The Northern King rose from his seat, the movement fluid and controlled despite his size. His gaze swept across the line of presented females, all of whom straightened hopefully, eyes lowered in rehearsed modesty. "I choose her," he said, pointing directly at me. "The one with the pale hair and the scar across her throat." The words hung in the air, impossible and absurd. Surely I had misheard. But the gasps of shock from those around me, the sudden widening of Sabine's eyes as she stared at me in disbelief, confirmed that the Northern King had indeed just singled me out from among all the flawless beauties on display. "Ilara," Alpha Bernard said, his voice strained with confusion. "You choose Ilara?" The Northern King's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication that he was displeased by the question. "Is my selection unclear or contested?" The dangerous edge to his tone made Bernard take an involuntary step back. "No, Your Majesty. Not contested at all. It's just unexpected." I stood paralyzed, unable to process what was happening. This made no sense. Powerful alphas did not choose scarred, forgotten girls like me. This had to be some cruel joke, or worse, a political maneuver with motives I couldn't begin to fathom. Then his eyes found mine again across the stunned silence of the hall, and I saw something flicker in their pale depths, something that might have been triumph. "Come forward, Ilara of the Moonstone bloodline," he commanded, my name rolling off his tongue as if he had spoken it 1,000 times before. "Come and stand beside your king." My legs trembled beneath me as I stepped forward, the weight of hundreds of stairs pressing against my skin like physical blows. The distance across the great hall seemed endless, a gauntlet of shocked faces and widened eyes. I clutched my mother's pendant, drawing strength from its familiar contours as I moved toward the imposing figure of the Northern King. This is a mistake, a cruel game, a political ploy. The thoughts tumbled through my mind in panicked succession, yet some primal part of me, the wolf that dwelled beneath my human skin, sensed something else, a current of power and purpose that transcended ordinary calculation. When I finally stood before him, I was struck by his sheer presence. He towered over me, his broad shoulders blocking out the light from the ceremonial fires. This close, I could see the details I had missed from afar, the fine silver threading in his midnight cloak that matched the simple crown upon his brow, the network of faint scars that marked his knuckles, speaking of battles fought and won, the almost imperceptible flecks of blue in his otherwise colorless eyes. Those eyes studied me now with disturbing intensity, missing nothing. I resisted the urge to cover my neck, where the most prominent of my scars stretched from just below my ear to disappear beneath the modest neckline of my gown, a jagged reminder of the attack that had nearly ended my life as a child. "Your Majesty," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper as I attempted a curtsy. Protocol demanded deference, regardless of my confusion. His lips curved into the barest suggestion of a smile. No need for such formality between us, Ilara of the Moonstone bloodline. He extended his hand, palm up. An invitation, a claim, a challenge. "You may address me as Damien." Whispers erupted around us. Such permission was unprecedented. Alphas maintained strict hierarchies, and kings even more so. To allow a mere female, and a scarred one at that, such familiarity was beyond shocking. I hesitated, then slowly placed my trembling hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and calloused, the grip firm but not painful. A strange sensation rippled through me at the contact, like recognition, though we had never met before this night. "Come," he said, leading me toward the high table where the pack leaders sat in various states of bewilderment. "Sit beside me while I explain my intentions to your guardians." He spoke the last word with a subtle inflection that suggested he found the term inadequate. As we moved through the crowd, I caught fragments of hushed conversations. Must be a mistake. Political alliance, perhaps, though why choose the damaged one? Heard rumors about the Northern King's peculiar interests. Embarrassment to our pack, she is. I kept my gaze fixed forward, refusing to acknowledge the vicious speculation. The Northern King, Damien, seemed utterly unaffected by the whispers, his expression serene as he guided me to the high table. My aunt and uncle had materialized from the crowd, their faces masks of conflicting emotions. Shock warring with the sudden calculation of potential advantage. Having me chosen by any alpha would have been unexpected. Being selected by the Northern King himself was beyond their wildest aspirations. "Your Majesty," my uncle began, bowing low, "we are overwhelmed by the honor you bestow upon our family by choosing our niece." "Indeed," Damien replied, his tone coolly polite. "Though I wonder why such a remarkable young woman stands at the margins of your pack, draped in borrowed finery and positioned last in the presentation line despite her impressive lineage." My uncle's face flushed. That is to say, Ilara's circumstances are somewhat unique. After her unfortunate incident, we thought it best to manage expectations. For her own protection, you understand. Protection. Damien repeated the word flatly, his grip on my hand tightening almost imperceptibly. "How considerate of you." The air between them crackled with tension. I could feel the wolf in my uncle retreating, submitting instinctively to the dominant presence before him. Damien emanated power in waves, controlled but unmistakable. He had not raised his voice or made any threatening gesture, yet my uncle seemed to physically shrink in his presence. "Your Majesty," Alpha Bernard intervened, clearly sensing the dangerous undercurrent. "Perhaps we might discuss the particulars of this arrangement in private, after the feast. There are certain protocols to be observed, agreements to be reached between our packs." Damien turned his unsettling gaze to our pack leader. "There is nothing to discuss, Alpha Bernard. I have invoked the right of first selection, and I have chosen. Ilara will return with me to the Northern Territories at dawn." "Tomorrow?" I blurted before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air, my breach of protocol drawing gasps from those nearby. Rather than showing anger at my interruption, Damien looked down at me with what might have been amusement warming his cold eyes. "Does that timeline displease you, little wolf? Would you prefer we depart tonight instead?" Heat flooded my cheeks. I haven't prepared. I have belongings, books. I never expected to be chosen at all, let alone to leave so soon. A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall. Typically, newly matched pairs would spend at least a week in formal courtship before the female departed for her new pack. It allowed for adjustment, for proper farewells, for the gathering of possessions and settling of affairs. "Very well," Damien conceded, his voice softening slightly. 3 days. No more. "My territories require my presence, and I've been away too long already." He turned back to Bernard. "I trust that is sufficient time for any necessary preparations?" Our alpha nodded quickly, relief evident in his posture. "Yes, of course, Your Majesty. Most generous. We shall arrange quarters for you and your men during your stay, and assist Ilara in her preparations." "That won't be necessary," Damien replied. "I've already secured accommodations in the village." As for Ilara's preparations, his gaze swept over my aunt and uncle. "I prefer she remain under my protection from this moment forward. But," my aunt began. "Is there some objection?" Damien interrupted, his tone deceptively mild. My aunt withered under his gaze. "No, Your Majesty. No objection." "Excellent." He released my hand at last, only to place his palm against the small of my back, guiding me toward an empty seat beside his own at the high table. The gesture was possessive, unmistakably marking me as claimed. The feast commenced in a haze of unreality. Servers brought platters of roasted meats and fresh bread, pitchers of wine and bowls of summer berries. Conversations resumed around us, though muted and cautious. I sat stiffly beside Damien, hyper-aware of his proximity, unable to process the sudden dramatic shift in my circumstances. "You should eat," he said quietly, placing a selection of foods on the plate before me. "The journey to the Northern Territories is long, and you'll need your strength." I picked at a piece of bread, my appetite non-existent beneath the weight of confusion and anxiety. "Why me?" I finally whispered, unable to contain the question any longer. Damien took a slow sip of wine before answering. Why not you? Please don't mock me, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. There were dozens of beautiful, unmarked females presented tonight. Any one of them would have been a more conventional choice. Conventional. He set down his goblet with precise care. Is that what you believe I want? Something conventional? I risked a glance at his face, trying to read the truth behind his words. I don't know what you want, Your Majesty. That's precisely the problem. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Damien, he corrected. And what I want, Alara of the Moonstone bloodline, is exactly what I have chosen. Before I could press further, he turned to engage Alpha Bernard in discussion about border security and trade agreements. I was left to my thoughts, which swirled in confused eddies. None of this made sense. I had spent years being overlooked, dismissed, pitied, at best. Now, in the space of an hour, I had been claimed by the most powerful alpha in the known territories. As the feast progressed, I became aware of covert glances directed our way. Some held envy, others suspicion, and a few, particularly from the rejected females, outright hostility. Sabine caught my eye from her position further down the table, her expression a complex mixture of shock and something that might have been respect. When the tables were finally cleared and musicians took their places for the traditional post-feast dancing, Damien stood and offered me his hand once more. The hall fell silent, all eyes turning toward us. The first dance belongs to the chosen pair, he said, his voice carrying in the expectant hush. I hesitated, sudden panic gripping me. I don't dance well, I admitted quietly. Years of self-imposed isolation had left me with little practice in such social graces. Then I shall lead, and you will follow, he replied simply, as if it were the most natural solution in the world. Taking a deep breath, I placed my hand in his and allowed him to guide me to the center of the hall. The musicians began a slow, haunting melody, traditional for mating ceremonies, its notes speaking of ancient bonds and timeless promises. Damien drew me into proper position, one hand at my waist, the other clasping mine. He moved with surprising grace for one of his size, leading me in steps that somehow accommodated my inexperience without making it obvious to observers. Why do you hide your scars? He asked suddenly, his voice low enough that only I could hear. The question caught me off guard. I don't hide them. Not exactly. They simply aren't pleasant to look at. And who decided this? That your marks of survival should be concealed? I frowned, the question striking deeper than I expected. Everyone. No one specifically. It's just known. Scars are imperfections. Wolves value physical perfection, especially in females. Some wolves, he corrected, executing a turn that brought us closer together. Not all. The intensity of his gaze made me look away. You speak as if you're different. I am. There was no arrogance in the statement, merely certainty. My pack is different. We honor strength, resilience, survival, not mere aesthetic perfection. Is that why you chose me? As some kind of political statement? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. His hand tightened slightly at my waist. I chose you, Alara, because from the moment you entered that hall, head high despite your fear, you were the only one I truly saw. The rest were shadows, pale imitations of what a queen should be. Queen, I echoed, the word sitting strangely on my tongue. You can't possibly mean, I am king, he interrupted, his voice taking on an edge of steel. I do not choose mere consorts or temporary companions. The female I select becomes queen of the Northern Territories, my equal in all things. The music swelled around us, but I barely heard it over the rushing in my ears. This couldn't be real. It was too fantastic, too sudden, too completely opposed to everything I had come to expect from my life. You know nothing about me, I protested weakly. I know enough. His eyes held mine, unwavering. I know you are of the Moonstone bloodline, healers and seers of great power. I know you survived an attack that would have killed most wolves. I know you've endured years of subtle cruelty with your dignity intact. What more do I need to know? My personality? My thoughts? My desires? Whether we are compatible in any way beyond your mysterious criteria for queenship? A genuine smile curved his lips then, transforming his severe features into something almost approachable. All things we will discover together, little wolf. Unless... His expression sobered. Unless you truly object to my selection. The ancient laws give me the right to choose, but they do not strip you of your right to refuse. The music drew to a close, leaving us standing in the center of the hall, still locked in our embrace, as the crowd watched in fascinated silence. "Do you refuse me, Alara of the Moonstone bloodline?" he asked, his voice pitched for my ears alone. The question hung between us, heavy with implication. I could say yes, could reject the Northern King before all assembled. It would create a diplomatic incident, perhaps even shame him, but the law would protect me from retaliation. I could return to my small, predictable life of quiet marginalization, or I could step into the unknown, claimed by a man I did not know, bound for lands I had never seen. As I hesitated, I became aware of a subtle change in the atmosphere, a tension that had nothing to do with the ceremony or Damien's unexpected arrival. Heads turned toward the main entrance, where a commotion had erupted among the guards. Then a bloodied messenger burst through the doors, his expression wild with panic. "Attack!" he cried before collapsing to his knees. "The Western rogues, they've breached the outer defenses. They're coming." His words were cut short by the sudden, deafening howl of a war horn, followed by the unmistakable sounds of combat erupting outside the great hall. Damien's posture shifted instantly, the courtly suitor vanishing beneath the mantle of a warrior king. His hand moved to the ceremonial sword at his hip as he stepped slightly in front of me, a protective gesture that seemed more instinct than thought. "It appears," he said grimly, "that our courtship will have to continue under somewhat different circumstances." The great hall erupted into chaos. Women screamed, men shouted commands, and the guards rushed to secure the entrances. I stood frozen beside Damien, my mind struggling to process this new threat. The Western rogues were notorious, a collection of exiled wolves from various packs who had banded together under a ruthless leader. They raided settlements, took what they wanted, and left destruction in their wake. "Get the females to safety," Alpha Bernard bellowed over the commotion. "Warriors to your positions." Damien's hand closed around my wrist, his grip firm but not painful. "Stay close to me," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. The warrior had fully replaced the suitor, his eyes scanning the hall with tactical precision. The shattering of glass punctuated his words, as the high windows of the great hall exploded inward. Dark shapes hurled through the openings, rogues in half-shift, more beast than human, their partially transformed bodies grotesque in the flickering torchlight. They landed with predatory grace among the scattering crowd, immediately targeting the weakest and most vulnerable. "Thereafter the unmated females," Damien growled, pulling me behind him as he drew his sword. The blade gleamed with an unusual blue-silver sheen that seemed to capture and amplify the light. "This isn't a random raid. It's coordinated." My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the other presented females being herded together by our pack's guards, their faces masks of terror. Sabine caught my eye across the chaos, her expression pleading as a guard pushed her toward a side exit. "We should join them," I said, instinctively moving toward the group. Damien's arm barred my path. "No, that's what they expect. They'll have forces waiting at the evacuation points." His eyes narrowed as he tracked the movements of the attackers. "This is too organized, too precise." They knew about the ceremony. A rogue lunged toward us, teeth bared in a snarl. With startling speed, Damien pivoted and struck, his blade slicing through the attacker's shoulder. The rogue howled in pain, stumbling back. "Silver forged," Damien explained at my shocked expression. "One of the few metals that can truly harm our kind." Before I could respond, another explosion rocked the hall, this time from the main doors, which burst inward in a shower of splintered wood. Through the dust and debris strode a massive figure, taller even than Damien, his body caught in a disturbing half-transformation that spoke of incredible control and power. The newcomer surveyed the chaos with obvious satisfaction, his amber eyes glowing with malice. When he spoke, his voice was distorted by the elongated jaw of his partial shift. "Greetings, Alpha Bernard. Such a lovely gathering you've arranged for us." His gaze shifted, landing on Damien with recognition and something like wariness. "And the Northern King himself. What an unexpected honor." "Reardon?" Damien replied coldly. "Still playing at being alpha, I see." The rogue leader's lips pulled back in a snarl, revealing fangs too large for his semi-human mouth. "More than playing, Damien. While you hide in your mountains, I've been building a real pack. One that takes what it wants. A collection of exiles and criminals is not a pack," Damien countered, subtly shifting his stance. I recognized the movement for what it was. He was preparing to attack. It's a rabble united only by its rejection from civilized society. Reardon laughed, the sound chilling in its genuine amusement. Civilized society. Such pretty words for a system built on bloodlines and ancient prejudice. His gaze swept the hall, lingering on the huddled group of females. "We've come for brides, Bernard. Your ceremony saved us the trouble of finding eligible females. You'll take nothing from here," Alpha Bernard declared, stepping forward with several of his strongest warriors. "This is sacred ground, protected by pack law." "Pack law," Reardon sneered. "Laws made by alphas to benefit alphas. They mean nothing to those of us you've cast out." As they spoke, I became aware of a subtle movement in the hall. The rogues were slowly encircling the group of unmated females, cutting off escape routes. Our pack's warriors seemed to realize this too late, already outmaneuvered despite their superior numbers. "We need to help them," I whispered to Damien, unable to stand by while others were threatened. "There has to be something we can do." His expression remained impassive, but I sensed a calculation happening behind those pale eyes. "There is. But you must trust me implicitly." "Can you do that, Alara?" I hesitated only briefly. Despite knowing him for mere hours, something in me recognized a fundamental truth about this man. He was dangerous, yes, but not to me. Never to me. "Yes." He nodded once, satisfaction flashing across his features. "When I engage Reardon, make your way to the eastern alcove, the one behind the ceremonial tapestry. There's a passage there that leads to the old temple. Do you know it?" I did. The temple was ancient, predating even our pack's settlement in these lands. Built into the mountainside, it had served as a sanctuary during conflicts of the past. "Yes, but what about the others?" "My men are already moving into position around the hall," he said, his voice low and urgent. "They'll create a diversion to allow the females to escape through the kitchens. But you..." His eyes locked with mine. "You're the primary target." "Me?" I whispered, confused. "Why would they want me?" "Because I chose you," he replied simply. "Reardon has been hunting me for years, seeking ways to undermine my rule. Taking you would be a direct challenge to my authority, and a personal blow." The implications of his words stunned me. I had gone from forgotten pack member to valuable political target in the space of an evening. The weight of my new reality pressed down on me, suffocating in its suddenness. "I don't understand any of this," I admitted, fear making my voice tremble. His expression softened marginally. "You will. But right now, we need to act. When I move, you run. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Get to the temple and wait for me there." He pressed something cool into my palm, a small ornate dagger with the same blue-silver sheen as his sword. "Use this if you must. Even a scratch will slow one of our kind." Before I could respond, chaos erupted anew. Alpha Bernard had apparently given a signal, and our warriors surged forward to engage the rogues. Simultaneously, dark-clad figures that I hadn't noticed before, Damien's men, I realized, emerged from shadowed corners of the hall, creating precisely the diversion he had described. Damien gave me one final intense look. "Go now, I'll find you." Then he was moving, cutting through the melee with deadly precision, making directly for Reardon. The rogue leader saw him coming and grinned, welcoming the challenge. I didn't wait to see their confrontation. Clutching the dagger, I slipped away from the center of the hall, keeping to the shadows as I edged toward the eastern wall. The ancient tapestry depicting our pack's founding hung there, its faded threads barely visible in the dimness. A scream made me turn. One of the younger girls, I didn't know her name, was being dragged by her hair by a leering rogue. Without thinking, I changed direction, moving toward them with Damien's dagger gripped tightly in my hand. "Let her go," I commanded, my voice steadier than I felt. The rogue looked up, surprise evident on his brutish face. Then he laughed. Another little bride. How convenient. He yanked the girl closer, making her cry out in pain. Wait your turn, pretty one. I'll get to you next. Something snapped inside me, a lifetime of being overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. I was done being the frightened, scarred girl who hid in corners. If Damien believed I was worthy of being a queen, perhaps it was time I started believing it myself. I lunged forward, remembering the basic defensive training all pack members received. The dagger felt unnaturally light in my hand as I slashed at the rogue's arm. The blade barely grazed him, but the effect was immediate and shocking. He howled in agony, releasing the girl and clutching at the thin cut, which sizzled as if burned by acid. "Run!" I shouted to the girl, who needed no further encouragement. She bolted toward the kitchen exits where others were being evacuated. The wounded rogue glared at me with hatred, his arm hanging uselessly at his side. "Silver witch," he spat. "I'll tear your throat out for that." He charged, faster than I expected. I braced myself, dagger raised, knowing I wouldn't be quick enough to avoid him completely. But the impact I anticipated never came. Instead, a blur of movement intercepted the rogue mid-lunge. One of Damien's guards, I realized, as the man efficiently dispatched my attacker with a swift, brutal stroke. The guard nodded at me, then gestured urgently toward the tapestry. "Go, my lady. The king ordered us to ensure your escape." Taking a deep breath, I turned and ran for the concealed passage, no longer trying to remain unseen. Behind me, the sounds of battle intensified. Snarls, screams, the clash of weapons. I forced myself not to look back, trusting that Damien's plan was working, that the others would find safety. The tapestry concealed a narrow opening in the stone wall. I slipped through, finding myself in a pitch-black corridor that smelled of dust and ancient secrets. Placing one hand on the wall to guide myself, I moved forward, the distant sounds of conflict growing fainter with each step. The passage twisted and turned, leading ever deeper into the mountain. Just as my eyes began to adjust to the darkness, allowing me to make out the rough-hewn walls around me, the corridor widened into a circular chamber. Faint light filtered through a high opening in the ceiling, a shaft to the surface that allowed moonlight to penetrate the underground space. This was the old temple, sacred ground where our ancestors had communed with the moon goddess. Circular stone benches surrounded a central altar, now cracked and worn with age. I sank onto one of the benches, suddenly aware of how violently I was trembling. The silence pressed in around me, broken only by my ragged breathing and the distant drip of water somewhere in the darkness. I clutched Damien's dagger, its weight somehow reassuring in my palm. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Had Damien survived the confrontation with Riordan? Were the other females safe? What about my aunt and uncle? As flawed as they were still the only family I had left. A noise from the passage made me stiffen, rising to my feet with the dagger held before me. Footsteps approached, too measured to be someone fleeing, too heavy to be one of the girls. "Alara?" Damien's voice echoed in the chamber, followed by the man himself emerging from the shadows. Relief flooded through me at the sight of him, though it quickly turned to concern. He was injured. Blood darkened one side of his ceremonial tunic, and a deep gash crossed his left cheek. Yet he moved with the same controlled power as before, showing no sign that his wounds hindered him. "You're hurt," I said, stepping toward him. He dismissed this with a slight shake of his head. "Nothing serious. Riordan always did fight dirty." His eyes swept over me, searching for injuries. "You're unharmed?" "Yes," though I hesitated, uncertain how he would react to my deviation from his instructions. "I didn't come straight here. One of the rogues had captured a girl, and I couldn't just—" "You intervened," he finished, something like pride warming his gaze. "Of course you did. It's in your nature, isn't it? To heal, to protect." I blinked, surprised by his perception. Most people saw only my scars, not the person beneath them. "How did you know?" "Your mother was a healer of great renown," he replied, moving closer until he stood directly before me. "Such gifts often pass through bloodlines. And you wear her pendant, the crescent moon, symbol of the healing arts. My hand instinctively rose to touch the silver crescent at my throat. You know about my mother? A shadow crossed his face. I knew of her, yes. Her reputation reached even the Northern Territories. Her loss was significant. There was something in his tone, some undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. Before I could question him further, he continued, The rogues have been driven back for now. My men are securing the perimeter, but we cannot stay here long. Reardon escaped, wounded, but alive. He'll regroup and return with greater numbers. What about the others? The girls who were presented? Safe, being escorted to their families by my guards. He reached out, gently taking the dagger from my hand. You used this. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. Only once. It barely touched him, but the effect was intense. Silver-forged weapons are rare. Few know the art of creating them anymore. He examined the blade before returning it to a sheath at his belt. You should keep it. I'll have another made for you once we reach the Northern Territories. The casual reference to our departure reminded me of the extraordinary circumstances that had brought us together. Here, in the aftermath of violence, the reality of being chosen by this man seemed even more surreal. Why me? I asked again, needing to understand. And don't evade the question this time. There has to be a reason you singled me out. Damien was silent for a long moment, his pale eyes reflecting the moonlight streaming from above. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its commanding edge, becoming almost gentle. 16 years ago, a northern patrol was ambushed near the border of these territories. All were killed save one, a young warrior who was left for dead, his throat torn open, his body broken. His hand rose unconsciously to his own neck, fingers tracing a line that mirrored my scar. He was found by a healer who was gathering herbs in the forest, a woman of extraordinary skill from the Moonstone bloodline. My breath caught as pieces began falling into place. My mother. He nodded once. Karina. She brought the warrior to a hidden cabin and tended his wounds for weeks, using arts long forgotten by most packs. When he was strong enough to travel, she sent him home with herbs for continued healing, and a warning never to return to these lands. The warrior was you, I whispered, understanding dawning. That's how you knew about my mother, yes. His expression softened with memory. I was young then, barely established as alpha of my pack. Had I died, the Northern Territories would have descended into civil war. Your mother saved not just my life, but the stability of my entire region. But that doesn't explain why you chose me. Gratitude to my mother doesn't extend to claiming her daughter, doesn't it? He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I made a vow as I recovered in that cabin, that I would repay the debt one day. When I learned of Karina's death, I thought that chance was lost forever. Then rumors reached me of her daughter, marked by her own survival, hidden away by her pack as if her scars were something shameful rather than badges of honor. His hand rose, fingers hovering near my cheek but not quite touching. I came to see for myself if the rumors were true. I did not expect to find. He paused, seeming to search for the right words. I did not expect you, Ilara. Your strength, your compassion, the light that shines from within you despite everything you've endured. The intensity of his gaze made me tremble. No one had ever looked at me this way, as if I were something precious, something worthy. You chose me out of obligation, I said softly, trying to ignore the inexplicable disappointment the realization brought. No. His denial was immediate and firm. Obligation brought me to the ceremony. Choice, my choice, made me claim you as mine. His voice dropped lower, intimate in the sacred space. I could have discharged my debt in many ways. I could have offered you protection within your own pack, or wealth or status. I chose to make you my queen because from the moment I saw you, I knew no other would suffice. I wanted to believe him. The sincerity in his eyes, the warmth in his voice, they called to something deep within me. Something that had been starved for recognition and belonging. How can you be so certain? I asked. You've known me for hours, not years. A smile touched his lips, the most genuine expression I had yet seen from him. Some things, little wolf, a king simply knows. He extended his hand, palm up, echoing his gesture from the great hall. "Will you come with me, Ilara of the Moonstone bloodline? Will you leave behind those who failed to see your worth and take your rightful place as Queen of the Northern Territories?" The question hung between us, weighted with destiny. In the silver moonlight filtering from above, Damien looked less like a man and more like something from ancient legend. A wolf king from the old stories, offering both challenge and sanctuary. I knew so little about him, about the lands he ruled, about what life as his queen would entail. Yet something deeper than knowledge pulled at me. An instinct, a recognition, perhaps even the stirring of something that might one day become love. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my hand in his. "Yes," I said, my voice steady despite the momentous nature of my decision. "I will go with you." Relief and triumph flashed across his features as his fingers closed around mine. But before he could speak, a low, menacing growl echoed through the chamber. We both turned toward the passage entrance, where a massive shape now blocked the way. Reardon stood there, his body grotesquely transformed beyond the half-shift I had seen earlier. Blood matted his fur, evidence of his confrontation with Damien. But his amber eyes burned with undiminished hatred and newfound desperation. "How touching," he snarled, his words distorted by his elongated muzzle. The king and his scarred little bride, pledging themselves in the old temple. Almost poetic. He took a shambling step forward. "But your story ends here, Damien. You've interfered with my plans for the last time." Damien pushed me behind him, drawing his silver-forged sword once more. "You're outmatched, Reardon. My men will be here any moment," the rogue leader laughed, the sound chilling in its confidence. "Your men are otherwise occupied. I brought reinforcements of my own." He tilted his head, listening. In the distance, the sounds of renewed combat echoed faintly. "No one is coming to save you, and when I'm done, I'll take your precious chosen one as my own." A fitting insult to add to your defeat. Time seemed to slow as Reardon lunged, a blur of muscle and fur in the moonlit chamber. Damien met the attack head-on, his silver sword flashing as it cut through the air. The clash of their bodies echoed against the ancient stone walls, primal and violent. I stumbled backward, searching desperately for some weapon, some way to help. My gaze fell on the cracked altar at the center of the temple. Moonlight pooled on its surface, illuminating carved symbols nearly worn away by time. I recognized them from my mother's teachings. Runes of protection, healing, and power. The two alphas fought with brutal intensity, neither fully human nor fully wolf. Damien maintained better control of his form, his movements precise and calculated despite his injuries. Reardon fought with savage desperation, using his greater bulk to force Damien back. "Run, Ilara," Damien commanded between strikes, blood streaming from a fresh wound on his arm. "Get to the surface exit," but I couldn't leave him. Not now. Not after everything. Something was building inside me. A pressure, a power I had never acknowledged, born of the Moonstone bloodline that Damien had recognized from the start. My mother's pendant grew warm against my skin as I approached the altar, drawn by instinct rather than conscious thought. The moonlight intensified as I stepped into its beam, filling my vision with silver brightness. Memories surfaced, my mother standing over her healing herbs, whispering ancient words as she worked, her hands guiding mine as she taught me to identify plants by touch and smell, her voice weak but determined, as she transferred her pendant to me on her deathbed. "The moon's blessing flows in our blood, Ilara. One day, when you need it most, you will feel its power and know what to do." I placed my hands on the altar, feeling the rough stone beneath my palms. The carved symbols seemed to pulse with energy, responding to my touch. Words rose unbidden to my lips. A language I had never learned yet somehow knew, passed through generations of my maternal line. Behind me, the fight grew more desperate. Damien was weakening, his earlier wounds taking their toll. A vicious blow from Reardon sent him crashing against one of the stone benches, his sword skittering across the floor. "I've waited years for this," Reardon growled, stalking toward the fallen king. The mighty Damien, brought low at last. As Reardon raised his clawed hand for a killing strike, The power building within me crested. Light erupted from my palms, flooding the chamber with blinding silver radiance. Both combatants froze, shielding their eyes from the sudden brilliance. "Enough," I commanded, my voice resonating with power I hadn't known I possessed. The word echoed in the chamber, carrying authority beyond my years or experience. Reardon turned toward me, confusion warring with rage on his bestial face. "What is this? What are you doing, little healer?" "Something I should have done long ago," I replied, stepping away from the altar. The light followed me, wrapping around my body like a living cloak, embracing what I am instead of hiding it. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in the rogue's amber eyes. "Witch," he spat, backing away slightly. "Moonstone witch." "Healer," I corrected, continuing my advance. "Daughter of Karina, chosen of the Northern King, and yes, heir to powers you could never understand." Damien had regained his feet, retrieving his sword with fluid grace despite his injuries. He moved to flank Reardon, effectively trapping the rogue between us. "It seems you've underestimated my chosen queen," he observed, a note of pride evident beneath the pain in his voice. Reardon's gaze darted between us, calculating his odds. With a snarl of frustration, he suddenly lunged, not at Damien, but at me, perhaps believing the female the easier target, despite the light surrounding me. It was his final mistake, as his claws reached for my throat, for the scar that marked my own survival. I did not flinch or retreat. Instead, I reached out, palms forward, and met his attack with the full force of the power flowing through me. The moment we connected, Riordan's body convulsed. The light from my hands flowed into him, illuminating him from within like a grotesque lantern. He howled, not in rage but in agony, as the moonlight stripped away the monstrous form he had embraced, forcing him back into human shape. He collapsed to his knees before me, suddenly appearing smaller, his naked body trembling with shock. The wounds Damien had inflicted stood stark against his pale skin, no longer partially concealed by fur. What have you done to me?" he gasped, staring at his human hands in horror. "I've taken what you perverted," I said softly, the light around me beginning to fade. "The gift of the shift is sacred. You twisted it, forced it beyond its natural limits, used it to terrorize and destroy. Now it's gone." Damien stepped forward, the tip of his silver sword resting against Reardon's throat. "A fitting end for one who abused the wolf's gift," he said coldly. "Death would be mercy after this." Reardon's eyes, now human and filled with tears, looked up at the Northern King. "Then grant me that mercy. Don't leave me like this." The last word emerged as a broken whisper, heavy with the weight of what he had lost. I placed my hand on Damien's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "No more death tonight," I said quietly. "There has been enough." Damien's pale eyes met mine, searching. He would have killed us both without hesitation. He would have taken you as a trophy and destroyed everything I've built. "And now he can do none of those things," I replied. "He's powerless, stripped of the wolf. Let your men take him back to the Northern Territories to face justice there. Let him live with what he's lost." For a moment, I thought Damien might refuse. The warrior in him, the alpha, demanded the elimination of a threat, but something else, perhaps the same quality that had led him to choose a scarred, overlooked female as his queen, made him slowly lower his sword. "Your compassion may be wasted on him," he said, though there was no rebuke in his tone. "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But it's not about him. It's about who we choose to be." Reardon sagged to the floor, broken not by physical wounds, but by the loss of his very identity. As if summoned by the cessation of conflict, footsteps echoed in the passage. Damien's men arriving at last, victorious in their battle against the remaining rogues. They secured Reardon without question, covering his nakedness and binding his hands, though he offered no resistance. One of the guards, a stoic man with a scarred face, approached Damien with a formal bow. "The attackers have been neutralized, Your Majesty. The pack's females are safe, though there were casualties among both our forces and Alpha Bernard's. Prepare for departure at dawn," Damien ordered, his voice weary but firm. "We return to the Northern Territories with prisoners." "And the lady?" the guard asked, his gaze flickering briefly to me. Queen, Damien corrected, the single word filled with unmistakable meaning. She rides at my side. The guard's eyes widened slightly, but he merely bowed again, deeper this time, before withdrawing to carry out his orders. As the temple emptied, leaving us alone in the fading moonlight, Damien turned to me. Blood still seeped from his wounds, and exhaustion lined his face. Yet he carried himself with the same regal bearing I had first noticed in the great hall. "What you did," he began, then paused, seeming to search for words adequate to describe what he had witnessed. "I don't fully understand it myself," I admitted, looking down at my hands. They appeared ordinary now, no trace remaining of the silver light that had flowed from them. The power was always there, I think. Dormant. Waiting for the moment I would need it most. "The Moonstone gift," he said with quiet reverence. "There are legends about such abilities, but few have witnessed them in generations." His expression grew serious. "What you did to Reardon, removing his ability to shift, it's a power some would fear. Some would seek to control." I met his gaze steadily. "Is that why you chose me? For this power you suspected I might have?" "No." His denial was immediate and firm. "I chose you for your courage, your compassion, your resilience. This gift." He gestured to the altar where the moonlight had filled me. "This is a revelation even to me." "Does it change things?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. "Does it change your choice?" Instead of answering directly, Damien closed the distance between us. His hand rose to my face, fingers finally making contact with the skin they had hovered near before. Gently, almost reverently, he traced the line of my scar from jaw to collarbone. "It changes nothing," he said softly, "except perhaps to confirm what I already knew, that you were born to be a queen, my queen." The warmth of his touch sent tremors through me, awakening sensations I had never experienced. For so long I had flinched from contact, expecting revulsion when others saw my scars. But Damien's fingers lingered on the marked tissue, his gaze holding nothing but admiration. "In the Northern Territories," he continued, "scars are not hidden. They are displayed with pride, each one telling a story of survival. Your story, Ilara, is only beginning." Emboldened by his words, I reached up to touch the fresh wound on his cheek, a gesture that would have been unthinkably forward mere hours ago. "This will scar," I observed, feeling the ragged edges of the cut. "Then I shall wear it proudly," he replied, "as a reminder of the night I found my queen." His hand moved from my scar to cut my cheek, his thumb brushing lightly across my lower lip. The gesture was questioning, seeking permission. In answer, I leaned into his touch, closing the last distance between us. His kiss was gentle at first, restrained, as if he feared I might shatter beneath his strength. But as I responded, my hands finding purchase on the solid warmth of his chest, the kiss deepened into something more primal. Heat bloomed between us, banishing the chill of the underground chamber. When we finally parted, both breathless, I saw something new in his pale eyes. A vulnerability beneath the strength, a need beneath the control. "Come home with me," he said, the words somewhere between command and plea. "Come to the Northern Territories, where your scars will be honored, your gifts celebrated, your strength recognized for what it truly is." In that moment, surrounded by ancient stone and fading moonlight, I felt the last of my doubts dissolve. This man, this king, had seen me when others looked away, had valued what others dismissed, had awakened powers within me that might have remained dormant forever without his recognition. "Yes," I said simply, the word carrying all the certainty my heart now felt. "I will come home with you." Dawn broke clear and cold over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose as our procession prepared to depart. Word of the night's events had spread through the pack, drawing curious onlookers who gathered to witness our leaving. I stood beside Damien's massive black stallion, dressed in traveling clothes provided by his personal guard, practical garments of fine quality, designed for both comfort and protection. Gone was the borrowed finery of the ceremony, replaced by attire befitting a warrior queen. My aunt and uncle approached hesitantly, their expressions a complex mixture of emotions. Regret, perhaps. Uncertainty. A dawning recognition of what they had overlooked all these years. "Ilara," my aunt began, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "We've come to bid you farewell." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Thank you for raising me after my mother's death," I said formally. "I wish you well." My uncle cleared his throat uncomfortably. "We didn't always, that is to say, we perhaps didn't fully appreciate." "It's done," I interrupted gently but firmly. "The past is past. I hold no grudge." It was true, I realized. The resentment I had carried for years had dissolved, replaced by something like pity. They had been so blinded by convention, so constrained by pack expectations, that they had failed to see the strength beneath my scars. They retreated, clearly uncertain how to relate to the niece they had marginalized, who now stood as an alpha's chosen queen. In their place came Sabine, her eyes wide with a newfound respect. "You were magnificent," she said without preamble. "Everyone's talking about how you faced down the rogue leader, how you glowed with moonlight." I smiled, touched by her directness. "Thank you for coming to say goodbye. Will you ever return?" she asked. I glanced at Damien, who stood nearby, conferring with his captains. "Perhaps, someday. As a visitor, not as the girl you knew." She nodded, understanding the distinction. "Safe journey, then, Your Majesty." The title fell from her lips with surprising naturalness, as if she too recognized the transformation that had occurred. After she departed, Alpha Bernard himself approached. He bowed formally to Damien, then turned to me with grudging respect. "It seems we underestimated you, Ilara. Your mother would be proud of what you did last night." "My mother," I replied evenly, "always saw me clearly. She never needed last night's events to recognize my worth." He had the grace to look abashed. "Indeed. A remarkable woman, Karina. And it appears her daughter is equally so." He hesitated, then added, "The Northern Territories are gaining a formidable queen." "Yes," Damien agreed, moving to my side. His wounds had been tended, his formal attire replaced by traveling leathers that did nothing to diminish his regal bearing. "We are indeed." When all farewells had been said and the procession assembled, Damien lifted me effortlessly onto his stallion before mounting behind me. His arms encircled me as he took the reins, his body a solid presence at my back. "Are you ready?" he asked, his breath warm against my ear. I looked out at the mountains ahead, my future, my destiny, my choice. The rising sun illuminated the peaks, making them glow with promise. Beneath my traveling cloak, my mother's pendant rested against my skin, no longer a memento of loss, but a symbol of inheritance and power. "Yes," I said, leaning back into the embrace of the man who had seen beyond my scars to the queen beneath. "I'm ready." As we rode through the gates, I held my head high, no longer hiding my scars or my face. The sun warmed my skin, and for the first time in years I felt truly seen, truly valued, truly home. Not in a place, but in the recognition of a kindred spirit who had found me when I thought myself lost forever. In the arms of a king who had named me his equal, in the embrace of a future bright with possibility and power. I was Ilara of the Moonstone bloodline, chosen of the Northern King, queen of the Shadow Crest Pack. Scarred, yes, but not defined by those scars. Rather made stronger by them, forged in fire and pain into something unbreakable. And as we crested the first hill, leaving my old life behind, I smiled into the dawn of my